This is weird. So kind of hodgepodge of bugs.
Hey guys, Miss Slack here. So today we are going to be looking at what happens to an environment when a natural disaster happens. What happens when there's a fire, flood, a volcano? How does that environment recover from that? How do the animals come back? What is the order of things? How does it come back? That is what the question we're going to be looking at, and that is called ecological succession. So there are two types of succession. There's primary succession and secondary succession. Both of them are very similar. Primary has just a few things that are different. So we're gonna start and look at primary succession. Like we were talking about, primary succession is gonna start with a community and then have a catastrophic event like a volcano. All right, so let's look at our community. We got a beautiful little model. Oh, Daddy Elk fell down. We'll fix him. So, we got small little trees. We'll pretend these are bigger than they are, just because the trees ended up being a little smaller than the plastic animals. But we got some elk and raccoons and beavers, some squirrels, moose, some different animals, some foxes, an owl, our nest of eagles, little predators, little grizzly bear, right? And they all live in this environment together, and it's at its climax community. A climax community means it's at the best community it can be. Now, a climax community is not going to last very long, most of the time, because things do happen, like earthquakes, fires, volcanoes, things like that. So climax communities won't last forever. Usually climax communities are going to consist of large predators, large herbivores, and large forests. All right? But this community is about to have a problem because it lives right on the edge of a volcano. So let's see what happens. All right, we're going to add our erupting powder. Oops. Well, that made a mess, didn't it? Alright, we need a few more things. Alright, so we got our water ready to go, and our volcano is getting close to eruption, so let's see it explode. Let's try this one more time. Alright, so obviously our volcano didn't really explode. Alright, the first part of primary ecological succession was the fact that we had the volcano explode. All right, we had something that destroyed the environment, meaning it destroyed the soil and everything in it. So what we're left with is now the same area, but now there's no animals, there's no grass. I know you can still see green, but we're pretending, right? There's no grass, and all that is left is rock. All right, so all of this is rock. Of course, the water wouldn't go anywhere, but it might have rock covering it at this point. All right, so that is step one. We just have rock. So the first species to colonize an area after a disaster like this, it can't be any kind of plants that we're used to seeing. So it's not going to be like grass or bushes or trees, and that's because they can't grow without soil. So what's going to grow is something called a pioneer species. And the pioneer species is the first species to come in. And that's going to be things like moss and lichen. So they're going to populate on our environment. So the moss and lichen are going to grow on the rocks. As they're growing on the rocks, they're going to start breaking these rocks down. As they break the rocks down, we'll get our next step. So after we have the moss all growing on there and they start breaking down and dying and decaying, we get soil. So as they're breaking those rocks down, it's making new soil. All right? After that new soil, we're going to start getting our first grass. All right? So grass. So we'll start having grass growing. So after we have had the pioneer species come in, which was the lichen, right? After the volcano, that was the first plant to populate. First one. So the second thing that happens is this lichen and moss start dying. As they die, it turns into soil. Once there's soil, plants can start to grow. So it can be things like grass and small flowers, things that aren't very big. They're going to be soft plants, all right? After that, we're going to start getting small bushes and trees. So I'm going to start putting those in. So once we have some small plants and bushes growing, you're going to start having different animals coming. So we're going to start having small herbivores coming in. Small herbivores. The hedgehog, the rabbit. All right. So with our ecological succession, we started with the volcano. It took out the entire environment. Our second part, we have rocks, right? Everything's solid rock. All the soil is gone. After all the soil's gone, we have our pioneer species come in. Those pioneer species are lichens and moss. With those lichen and mosses, it starts to decay and break down the rocks, making soil. Once we have soil, there's going to be grass and small flowers all growing in here. After the grass and small flowers, we have small bushes and small baby trees starting to grow, all right? And we have small herbivores starting to repopulate the area. So the next part is we're gonna actually start having larger trees starting to grow, okay? So we're gonna put in some larger trees. And with these larger trees, larger animals are going to start to move back. Right. We've had our volcano erupt. It turned the whole ground, losing all the soil. All the soil was gone, it became rocks. All those rocks were there. And the pioneer species, the first species started to come, and that is lichen and moss. So that lichen and moss sat on the stones, broke it all down as it started to die, and created soil. After that soil was there, we were able to grow grass and small flowers and plants. With those small flowering plants, we got small herbivores coming back in, along with smaller predators to then eat the herbivores. After that, we had our larger bushes and small wooded trees coming in. And then we started having larger trees starting to grow as the environment gets it. After that, we actually reach our climax community. So everything's going to go back in. And that's our climax community. So we discussed primary succession, but what about secondary succession? Secondary succession is exactly like primary, except we start with soil. So it's going to be situations like fires or floods where the soil is still there. So we'll start with soil. Once you have the soil, it's going to take a little bit, but it's not going to take as long as primary succession. We're going to start growing things like small plants. It's going to be soft plants like grass or flowers. And once those grass and flowers start growing, we're then going to get smaller bushes and plants, similar to these guys, along with the prey and predators that go along with that. So things like bunnies and foxes, small animals that don't need the cover of large trees. After we have these smaller plants, we're gonna then get bigger wooded plants, which will eventually, once those guys all grow up, would be our climax community. So again, secondary succession is just like primary, except we start with soil. So with primary succession, we start with like lava rocks, right? While with secondary succession, we start with soil. It's the same order, except primary, we have extra things. So we have the rocks, and then we have the pioneer species. The species of animal that takes over first, which is going to be lichens or moss. So they're the only things that can really attach to these rocks and start breaking them down. All right? So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, I'm sorry the volcano didn't explode the way I would have liked. But that's the thing about science. Things sometimes don't go as planned, and that's okay. Maybe we'll get a better volcano next time. All right, see you.